Children can be very adorable and innocent, but sometimes they can be downright terrifying. Whether they are possessed by demons, corrupted by evil, or just plain psychopathic, these children will make you think twice before tucking them in at night. In this video, we will count down the top 6 scariest kids in the world, and you might want to watch this with the lights on because these kids are not here for fun and games. Nehemiah Grigo. In some sermons for the local jail in New Mexico, Pastor Greg Grigo shared his journey on how he went from being a Californian gangster to finding God and becoming a pastor at a local church. But despite this inspiring transformation, Pastor Greg could not save his teenage son. Nehemiah Grigo was the 7th of 10 children born to Greg and the 2nd child born to Sarah, a devout couple who lived in South Valley, New Mexico. While Greg was out of the house speaking in local jails, Sarah stayed at home and homeschooled Nehemiah and his siblings. Nehemiah actively participated in the church, engaging in mission trips and assisting with the youth ministry. Nehemiah looked up to his father, who once served in the military and was frequently seen wearing his father's uniform. However, a very dark side was hidden beneath Nehemiah's seemingly everyday life. He had secret fantasies about plotting mass murder and then killing himself. These twisted thoughts eventually manifested into a heinous plan to murder his family, others, and himself. Greg and Sarah had a gun closet, which Nehemiah had access to once Greg taught him how to use one. Little did Greg know that this precautionary act would prove to be his greatest undoing. On January 19, 2013, Nehemiah's life took a terrifying turn. Just before the rest of the family went to bed that night, Nehemiah had a heated argument with his mother, who then sent him to bed early. Seething with rage, Nehemiah waited till the whole house was asleep and charged into his parents' room, where his mother slept with her 9-year-old son Zephaniah. Nehemiah grabbed a .22 rifle from his parents' closet and shot his mother in the head. When Zephaniah woke up, Nehemiah told him of how he shot their mother. When Nehemiah turned on the lights and forced Zephaniah to see their deceased mother's motionless body, Zephaniah's denial changed to fear. Zephaniah's screams filled the air as he was overcome with fear and anguish, prompting Nehemiah to shoot his brother in the head as well. Tragically, his rampage continued, killing his 5-year-old and 2-year-old sisters, Jael and Angelina. A few minutes later, Nehemiah's 12-year-old girlfriend got an email, a photo of Sarah's body. Nehemiah camped in a bathroom and waited for his father to return home from work. Upon his arrival at 5 a.m. that morning, Nehemiah shot his father multiple times with an AR-15 type semi-automatic rifle. He then loaded the 2 guns in his parents' van and drove to his church, where he deceived his girlfriend and other church members that his family got killed in a car accident. Nehemiah also informed a few others that his family's home had been invaded by mysterious gunmen. He also planned to go to the nearest Walmart, kill more people, and die in a shootout with the police. Thankfully, his pastor and a retired homicide detective became suspicious of Nehemiah's behavior and story, leading them to call 911. They drove Nehemiah back to his house, where they found the lifeless bodies of his family members. Nehemiah confessed to the murder and was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. He was tried as an adult under New Mexico law, which prohibits the death sentence or life in prison without the possibility of parole for juveniles. In October 2015, Nehemiah pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of child abuse, resulting in death. Initially, a family court judge offered a juvenile sentence that would have allowed Nehemiah to be released after therapy at 21. However, the prosecution filed an appeal, and the decision was revoked by the Court of Appeal in 2019. Nehemiah was sentenced to life in jail as an adult, with the chance of parole after serving 30 years for murdering his siblings and 7 years for murdering his parents. The terrible case divided the Grigo family, with his aunt and uncle lobbying for Nehemiah's juvenile sentence, while his sisters and the stage fought to keep him in prison. Nehemiah filed an appeal with the New Mexico Supreme Court in April 2020, claiming that he should have been punished as a juvenile owing to poor mental health care before his sentencing hearing. His legal team claimed he had post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia, and brain damage due to parental abuse and neglect. They also highlighted his display of regret and recovery while in detention. On the other hand, the state opposed the appeal, noting Nehemiah's threat to society and system manipulation to avoid accountability. Nehemiah Grigo was eventually sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms, plus 7 years to run concurrently with the life sentences, with credit awarded for the 2,476 days, 6 years and 285 days previously spent, and must spend 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke. In April 2006, chaos struck the community of Medicine Hat in Canada when a family was massacred in their home, and the only survivor was their 12-year-old daughter, Jasmine Richardson. However, she wasn't the victim. She masterminded this massacre with her 23-year-old boyfriend, Jeremy Steinke. Born in 1993 in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada, Jasmine Richardson was a sweet and happy girl. She lived with her parents, Mark and Deborah Richardson, and her younger brother, Tyler Jacob. However, her life took a dark turn when she crossed paths with Jeremy Steinke, a 23 23-year-old goth whom she met at a punk rock show in early 2006. What Jasmine didn't know was that Jeremy was a ticking time bomb who wished he was never born. He was raised by an alcoholic mother who had an abusive partner, and he also faced bullying at school and had already experienced suicidal thoughts before meeting Richardson. From an early age, he had a mystic persona, wearing a vial of blood around his neck and claiming to be a 300-year-old werewolf. Was this delusion enough to deter Jasmine? No. Instead, she got captivated by his gothic lifestyle and signed up on the website vampirefreaks.com. She lied about her age to Steinke and started to wear dark makeup to make herself look older than she was, posting dark and violent messages on the website. When Mark and Deborah Richardson found out about her relationship with Steinke, they immediately forbade their young daughter from seeing him. But to Jasmine, this protective action was a threat to her twisted love and enough reason to murder her entire family. Livid at Jasmine's parents, Steinke wrote on his blogging platform on April 3, 2006, about how he wanted to slit their throats. What was more shocking was that it was sweet Jasmine who originated the plan to murder her family. She communicated her plans to Steinke via email, where she stated, "It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." This enthusiasm was enough ginger for Steinke, and he replied, "Well, I love your plan, but we need to get a little more creative with things like details and stuff." Jasmine reportedly confided in her friends about her murderous plans, but sadly nobody took her seriously. The night before the murder, this twisted couple watched the movie Natural Born Killers, about a twisted, violent young couple. Inspired by this twisted narrative, they transformed their plans into a nightmarish reality. In the basement of Jasmine's home, they mercilessly stabbed Mark and Deborah Richardson to death. Unrelenting in their brutality, they ascended the stairs and slit the throat of 8-year-old Tyler Jacob. With their sinister mission accomplished, the pair fled the scene in Steinke's vehicle. The following day, Tyler's friend went over to play with his friend, but noticed a haunting sight through a window: a lifeless body. Alarmed, he rushed home and informed his mother, who promptly contacted the authorities. Inspector Brent Secondiak speedily arrived at the scene and looked into the basement window, where he saw at least one body lying lifeless. He quickly called for backup, hoping to save lives within the house, but the grim reality revealed no survivors. Initially, the police thought Jasmine was probably kidnapped or dead too. In their search for her, they issued an Amber Alert, appealing to the public for assistance. However, as investigators uncovered compelling evidence in her room and locker, the shocking truth emerged. Jasmine was the prime suspect. According to police reports, Steinke attacked Deborah, stabbing her multiple times to death. Mark put up a fight with a screwdriver, but he was no match for this murderous couple. Steinke ascended the stairs and watched Tyler Jacob plead for his life before his demonic sister stabbed him in the chest multiple times, and her boyfriend slit his throat open. Hours later, Jasmine and Jeremy were spotted having the time of their lives at a party. Jeremy gloated to his friends about gutting Jasmine's parents like a fish and watching his girlfriend slit her brother's throat open. On April 24, 2006, the police caught up with Jeremy and Jasmine and some of Jeremy's friends in Leader, Saskatchewan, sleeping inside Steinke's truck. They both faced 3 charges of first-degree murder. The once sweet Jasmine Richardson became the youngest person in Canadian history to be charged with multiple counts of murder. During her 2007 trial, Jasmine, identified as JR, to protect her name as she was a minor, pleaded not guilty. She claimed that she only joked about murdering her family and didn't intend to go through with it. A jury found her guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, leading to the maximum sentence for a youth: 6 years in prison, followed by 4 years of supervised conditional release within the community. By the time of her conviction, she had turned 13. Her lover was tried as an adult, facing 3 counts of first-degree murder, and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 25 years, given his age at the time of conviction. In the years following her conviction, Jasmine Richardson embarked on an extensive journey of rehabilitation and treatment. Psychiatric assessments revealed diagnoses of conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder in Jasmine. After completing her sentence, she was released from prison on May 6, 2016. Now 28 years old, Jasmine lives under a new identity and is said to deeply regret her actions. As for Jeremy Steinke, he is still serving his sentence till he is eligible for parole in 2033. He has changed his name to Jackson May, Morgan Geyser, and Anissa Wire. In 2014, 2 12-year-old girls lured their friend into the woods, stabbed her 19 times, and left her to die. Why? Because they thought it would make Slender Man happy. Morgan Geyser and Anissa Wire, both born in 2001, formed a friendship in the 6th grade. Their friendship flourished through a shared interest in horror stories and online memes. One particular character captured their imagination: Slender Man. This fictional figure, known to be a tall, thin, and faceless monster who loves stalking children, gained popularity through various websites, games, and videos ever ever since it went viral on the internet in 2009. Their obsession with proving their loyalty to Slender Man by sacrificing a human life led them down a dark and murderous path. I guess sacrificing their best friend to Slender Man was the easiest plan they could come up with. Morgan and Anissa set this plan rolling on the night of Morgan's slumber party. Morgan's mother organized a party for the three best friends. They intended to kill Peyton Leutner in her sleep that night, but I don't know what changed their mind. They decided to do it at a nearby park the next day. On May 31st, 2014, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier lured Peyton into the secluded woods near a park in Waukesha, Wisconsin, where they pretended to play hide and seek. Morgan and Anissa convinced Peyton to lie on the ground and cover herself up with the leaves. Suddenly, Anissa pinned Peyton on, and Morgan brutally stabbed her 19 times with a 5-inch long kitchen knife, targeting her arms, legs, and torso. They told Peyton to wait for them to get help when in fact they were going to the Nicolet National Forest, where they believed Slender Man lived. Peyton's strong will to live caused her to painfully crawl towards a nearby road, where she was found almost unconscious by a cyclist who immediately called 911.
911. What's the address of your emergency?
Waukesha County, Lenny. I'm transferring over a caller on Big Bend at the dead end just south of Rivera. And he came upon a 12-year-old female. She appears to be stabbed.
She appears to be what?
Stabbed.
Stabbed?
Correct.
Okay.
Are you still there? Yes.
Hi, sir. So are you with this 12-year-old female?
Yeah, she says she's having trouble breathing. She said she was stabbed multiple times.
Stabbed multiple times?
Yeah.
Peyton narrowly escaped death as she suffered 2 major wounds, one that almost nicked a major artery in her heart by an inch, and another severe one that cut through her diaphragm, liver, and stomach. After this gruesome attack on Peyton Leutner, the police caught up with Morgan and Anissa after they were spotted walking along a nearby highway. Both girls faced charges of attempted first-degree intentional homicide as adults, carrying a maximum prison sentence of 65 years. According to police reports, Morgan and Anissa claimed that their attack on Peyton was to please Slender Man and secure their positions as his slaves. They believed that Slender Man was going to punish them or even kill their families if they disobeyed him. This was why they decided to sacrifice their best friend Peyton, since it would be considerably easier to lure her to death. The most shocking thing about this story is that Morgan and Anissa showed no signs of remorse or empathy for their heinous actions. Morgan Geyser was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia and a psychotic spectrum disorder. Even her mother and classmates admitted to noticing some symptoms in her before the attempted murder. Anissa Weier was also diagnosed with a delusional disorder. In 2017, Morgan's plea deal led to a guilty but not criminally responsible verdict due to her mental illness. She was sentenced to 40 years in a mental health facility. That same year, Weier also accepted a plea deal, resulting in a reduced charge of attempted second-degree intentional homicide. A jury found her guilty but not criminally responsible due to mental illness, and she received a 25-year sentence in a mental health facility. Anissa Weier was released from the Winnebago Mental Health Institute on September 13, 2021, having served 4 years of her sentence. The now 21 years old young lady remains under state supervision until the age of 37. Anissa expressed deep remorse and regrets for her actions and now wants to support children struggling with mental health issues. On the other hand, Morgan Geyser remains confined at the Winnebago Mental Health Institute with conditional release eligibility set for 2039. Morgan has also expressed deep remorse for her actions and a desire to personally apologize to Peyton Leutner. The now 21 years old Peyton Leutner shared her experience in her interview with ABC News in 2019. She claimed to have forgiven her attackers and moved on with her life. Reflecting on her friendship with Morgan Geyser, she expressed a desire to distance herself from that chapter of her life and felt sorry for both of them. John Venables and Robert Thompson. What good could have come out of the friendship between a child who had a rough, abusive childhood and another bully who had severe anger issues? The story of John Venables and Robert Thompson is enough evidence of the height of evil that kind of friendship can breed. These two boys were a match made in hell. Pandemonium struck the whole of Merseyside in Britain when the battered body of the missing boy, James Bulger, was found near the former Walton and Anfield railway station. Like any regular day, John and Robert snuck out of school on February 12, 1993, to go to the New Strand Shopping Center in Bootle. Throughout that day, they were captured by the shopping center's CCTV shoplifting different items, such as sweets, batteries, a troll doll, and a can of blue Humbrol modeling paint. I guess they got tired of stealing and decided to do something more interesting. They initially planned to kidnap a child from the mall, leading them to the busy road beside the shopping center and pushing them into oncoming traffic. I'm not sure what is fun about this, but who knows what ran through their minds at that point. That same afternoon, Denise and her 2-year-old son, James Bulger, walked walked into A.R. Tim's butcher shop on the lower floor of the shopping center. Denise had let go of her son's hand to pay for her purchase, but she soon realized that James was missing. James walked into the hands of the two scheming boys. John and Robert took Bulger to the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, not far from the New Strand shopping center. They dropped him on his head, causing injuries to his face. The boys made jokes about pushing Bulger into the canal. The boys then walked about 2.5 miles across Liverpool, and many people saw them but didn't do anything to help. Two people did try to confront Thompson and Venables, but they lied and said Bulger was their brother, or that he was lost and they were taking him to the police station. Finally, the boys arrived in Walton, just across the Walton Lane police station, but they got scared and took Bulger up a steep bank to a railway line. All the items that they shoplifted came in handy at this point. One of the boys threw the blue Humbrol paint into James's left eye. The boys rained hell on little James Burglar as they kicked and stomped on him and threw bricks and stones at him. They also put batteries in his mouth, and there were claims that they may have sodomized the boy with the batteries, although there was no physical evidence to back it up. Finally, they dropped a heavy railway fish plate on James, which cracked his little head in 10 places. Pathologist Alan Williams said that James's body was littered with 42 injuries, and they couldn't determine which one caused his death. With the hopes of covering the tracks of their heinous acts, John and Robert set James's body across the railway tracks and weighed his head down with rubble, hoping that a train would run over him. After they left, a train ran across James's body and split him in half. 2 days later, a group of children found Bulger's severed body. A forensic pathologist confirmed that the little boy had died long before the train severed him. The police suspected the boys had sexually assaulted James because he was found naked, waist down, and his foreskin had been pulled back forcibly. And when the boys were questioned about this, they didn't provide any details about it. On February 20th, 1993, Thompson and Venables were charged with abduction and murder. They were found guilty on November 24th, making them the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. They were sentenced to indefinite detention and remained in custody until June 2001, when the parole board recommended their release on lifelong parole when the boys turned 18 with new identities. In 2008, Venables was arrested after getting into a drunken fight and was given a formal warning by the probation service. He struggled with drug and alcohol problems, engaged in antisocial behavior, and revealed his true identity to friends. 2 years later, he was sent back to prison after being found with sexually abusive images of minors. The parole board recommended his release again in 2013. However, in 2017, he was arrested again for possessing child abuse images and was sentenced to 40 months in prison in February 2018, nearly 25 years after he murdered James Bulger. It looks like prison did a lot of good for Robert, as he has not committed any further offenses since his release. Thompson has a new identity that is protected by an unprecedented injunction, which applies worldwide. Searching for his address could result in a prison sentence. In 2010, it was reported that he was in a long-term relationship with a man who knew his true identity, Lionel Tate. In 2001, when Lionel was just 14 years old, he received a life sentence without the chance of parole for the death of 6-year-old Tiffany Eunuch. This tragic incident had occurred 2 years prior, making Lionel the youngest person in the United States to receive such a severe sentence. But let's go back to where it all began. On July 28, 1999 in Florida, Lionel's mother, Kathleen Grossett Tate, babysat her childhood friend's daughter, Tiffany, for the evening. After having dinner, Kathleen retired to her bedroom, leaving Lionel and Tiffany to play. As the evening progressed, both kids were running up and down the stairs, making a lot of noise. Despite Kathleen's requests for them to settle down, they continued their energetic play. Lionel blamed Tiffany for the noise, leading Kathleen to warn her that she would beat her butt if she didn't quiet down. Kathleen recalls hearing a strange noise that sounded like someone in distress. She asked Lionel what was wrong, and he said that Tiffany was on the floor moaning. She assumed Tiffany was having a nightmare and went back to bed. Around 45 minutes later, Lionel went upstairs and told his mother that Tiffany had stopped breathing. Lionel, who weighed 170 pounds at the time, told his mother that he was simply wrestling with her when she suddenly stopped breathing. He explained that he had put her in a headlock and accidentally caused her head to hit the side of a table. He also described how Tiffany wailed in pain on the floor to the point of urinating in her pants. Instead of running to get his mother, Lionel went back to watching TV. By the time he finally went to get Kathleen and told her that Tiffany wasn't breathing, it was too late. The little girl's body was already cold. Considering the significant size difference between Lionel and Tiffany, it's clear that Tiffany stood no chance against Lionel, whether they were playing or not. The main question here is whether Lionel was a violent child who intentionally acted on his murderous tendencies and attacked Tiffany, or if it was harmless play that went too far. If it were a simple case of Lionel imitating his favorite wrestling moves, the severity of Tiffany's wounds told another story. According to experts, the injuries Tiffany sustained were severe, with 35 documented injuries. Her legs, feet, and neck showed serious bruising, and the force applied to her body was similar to getting hit by a speeding car. She also had had a fractured skull, a lacerated liver, a fractured rib, and a swollen brain. You can only sustain these kinds of injuries if you fall from a 3-story building. Initially, Lionel claimed that he was just trying out professional wrestling moves he had seen on TV without intending to kill Tiffany. However, he later admitted that he jumped from the staircase, causing the injuries when he landed on the 6-year-old girl. This tragic incident raises many questions. Could it have been prevented? Were there any warning signs? Lionel had a troubled history even before this incident. Despite being described as an intelligent boy with an average IQ and street smarts, Lionel had a previous record of trouble. He had been suspended from school 15 times and had shown other behavioral issues such as stealing, lying, and fighting. Knowing that her son had this record of violence, why did she leave Tiffany alone with him? Her actions are suspicious if you ask me. In Florida, the law required the jury to convict Lionel of first-degree murder, whether or not they believed that Lionel intended to kill Tiffany. The law considered his actions as child abuse resulting in death and sentenced him to life in prison. Lionel's sentence sparked controversy due to his young age at the time of the murder, Tiffany's age, and the severity of his punishment. He became the youngest person in modern U.S. history to receive a life sentence, raising concerns about the treatment of juvenile offenders in Florida's justice system. After his conviction, many people advocated for leniency in Lionel's case, including the lawyers who prosecuted him. The judge told the prosecution that if they believed Lionel didn't deserve a harsh sentence, they shouldn't have charged him with first-degree murder. In January 2004, Lionel's conviction was overturned due to the lack of a mental competency evaluation before trial. This allowed him to accept the original plea deal he had rejected. He was released on 1 year's house arrest, followed by 10 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. Lionel walked out of jail as a free man in January 2004, although he had to wear an ankle monitoring device. Unfortunately, Lionel failed to make the most of his second chance. In September 2004, he was caught by the police with a knife outside his home. As a result, his probation was extended to 15 years, and he was warned that another parole violation would send him back to prison indefinitely. In May 2005, Lionel faced additional charges of armed burglary with battery, armed robbery, and violation of probation rules. He threatened a Domino's pizza delivery man with a handgun at his friend's apartment. Lionel accepted a plea bargain in March 2006, admitting to violating probation by possessing a gun during the robbery. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the violation. On February 19, 2008, Lionel pleaded no contest to the robbery charges and received a 10-year sentence in addition to his previous 30-year sentence for probation violation. He is currently serving his time at the South Bay Correctional Facility in Florida and will be eligible for release in January 2031 when he turns 42. Eric Smith. Most children love to play with toys, but Eric Smith had a better pastime: torturing and gutting animals, a pastime that soon involved a little boy named Derek. The seemingly adorable Eric Smith was born in 1979 in Steuben County, New York, to Ted and Tammy Smith. Eric had a troubled childhood. He threw violent temper tantrums and banged his head on the floor. With his fiery red hair, large ears, and thick glasses due to poor eyesight, Eric didn't fit in with his peers. He also struggled with speech, which made him a target for relentless bullying at school. Instead of standing up to his bullies, Eric took his anger out on small animals. On August 2, 1993, Doreen Raube's 4-year-old son Derek insisted on going to a nearby park for a summer recreation program alone. Although Doreen felt very uncomfortable, she allowed him to go alone as she tended to his crying baby brother. Shortly after Derek left, it started to rain, and Doreen raced to the park to pick him up. To Doreen's dismay, she soon discovered that Derek never showed up at the park. Tragically, almost 5 hours later, the police found Derek's lifeless body in a small patch of woods near the park, where Eric happened to be. 13-year-old Eric had enrolled in the same summer recreation program, which could have been a positive experience for him to socialize with others despite his troubled past. But Eric was expelled from the camp for his misbehavior and was riding his bike down the road. Unfortunately, Derek, walking down the same road, walked into the hands of the brooding, violent Eric. Eric lured Derek into the woods where he rained hell on him. Eric strangled Derek, dropped a large rock on his head, and sodomized him with a small stick. He even poured Kool-Aid from Derek's lunchbox into his wounds. An autopsy revealed later that the blunt trauma Derek received to his head and strangling killed him. Just 4 days after Derek's murder, Eric Smith accompanied his stepfather to the police station, claiming he wanted to assist in solving the crime. Initially, he denied seeing Derek on his way back home. However, he later changed his story, admitting that he had seen Derek across the street from the open field, the exact location where Derek's body was found. Eric Smith's accurate description of Derek's t-shirt and lunch bag led one investigator to believe that he might have witnessed something related to the murder. On August 8, 1993, Eric confessed to his parents, and his great-grandfather escorted him back to the police station, where he was promptly arrested. The Savona community was left in shock, as no one could fathom that a child could commit such a heinous act against another child. During the trial, a defense psychiatrist diagnosed Eric with intermittent explosive disorder, a mental condition known to cause unpredictable and violent behavior. Medical examinations, including brain function and hormone level tests, failed to provide any explanation for his violent tendencies. However, the prosecution argued that such a disorder was rarely observed in someone of Eric's age. Eric Smith was tried as an adult and convicted of second-degree murder on August 16, 1994. He received a sentence of 9 years to life in prison, which was the maximum penalty for a juvenile murderer. Initially placed in a juvenile facility, he was transferred to a state prison in 2001. From 2002 until January 2020, Eric Smith was denied parole 10 times. The parole board cited concerns for public safety and opposition from Derek Roby's parents as reasons for their decisions. In 2012, during one of his numerous parole hearings, Eric expressed his willingness to live in a shelter or halfway house if released, and he promised he would never set foot on Savona. Finally, on February 1, 2022, Eric Smith was released from prison after being granted parole on his 11th attempt. He is now 42 years old and resides in Queens, New York. He claims to have been transformed by God and believes he deserves a fresh start. He also mentions his fiancée and expresses a desire to pursue a college degree in crusade evangelism while continuing his ministry work. We hope this newfound faith keeps him from committing another crime. And those were some of the scariest kids in the world. If you want to see similar videos, click on one of the cards on the screen.